What's up, everybody? Today we are finally doing the video continuing the XLT to platinum conversion, and we're starting with how to go from this to this. So this is an aftermarket head unit. This is a JVC. This will work for a whole bunch of other ones, but most importantly, our steering wheel controls still work. Now we do have a microphone set up down here. Here's our USB port. But we have the setup, we're going to be switching from this. This actually worked really well if you don't want to spend the extra money to be able to use the sync port here, or if this has the regular plug and you don't want to lose it, this worked well. All right, so we got to take this guy out here. There's just a little piece at the bottom you'll see to pop that out. There's a screw here, or bolt here, excuse me. We're going to do the same thing right on the other side of this. So this right here, pop it out. Another bolt. This is where I have my microphone, and this used to be where the USB came out. You want to pull this out. Or excuse me, you don't have to pull that out. But we are, because I need to get rid of that microphone on here. So from here, this is actually just kind of prying it and getting the clips to come out. You can undo these plugs if you want. I'm not going to. I feel no strong urge to. You want to try to pull straight out if you can. Here I am just taking 4 of the bolts that secure the head unit in place out, and then we'll remove it. That's all that holds it in. I do want to take a second. Obviously, I've installed the actual head unit at this time, but this process is basically identical for removing a factory head unit. Just it's a little less of a mess in the back of it. You'll see all the wiring to make all this stuff work. It is a lot, and I haven't found a good way to clean it up and make it look neat. But we will go over kind of which wires get connected to which for this setup, because it is a little goofy when you're trying to figure it all out. But I will demonstrate, I will kind of go over each of the wires that you need. Also, we will show how I ran my GPS. We will talk about microphone and USB options. I've since installed kits I will do full videos on that actually show connecting the USB setup and how I ran the different microphone that uses the factory location for your microphone. All right, so I know this looks like a giant mess, and that's kind of because it is. So some connections we're gonna push right out of the way. Our USB, we're gonna toss to the front. We have our mic connection here. We're gonna also toss to the side. This is a front camera, obviously optional, one we do plan to install at some point. So right out of the wood gate, they're out of our hair a little bit here. Let's talk about things that are not. So this is the Maestro RR iData link. A lot of head units are set up to work with these. There's a bunch of different brands. You don't have to stick with JVC. There are some wiring stuff to go with that. So these are the 3 truck plugs. On my truck, one of these is not used. I believe these 2 are. I think this is the one that's not used. But it still comes with the kit. You just leave it unplugged. So this is a big wiring nightmare, as you guys can see. Some other things we're going to toss out of the way. This is an auxiliary in and 2 subwoofer outs. This pink wire you will not need. This OBD2 thing is not necessarily required, but some people might like it. I'm actually going to mess with that soon and just see how it is, see if I like it. So just trying to clean some of this up. This is such a disaster. On this kit, there are wires you do not need to use. There's a yellow and black, a brown, and this pink. These do not get used on this setup. What you will use, it says PRKSW. This green wire will go green to green in your kit. You will need that. This purple and white wire is your reverse signal. You will need that hooked up as well. That tells this to turn to switch screens when you're in reverse, excuse me. On the actual head unit plug, there's a remote. It's either a remote or steering wheel remote input, excuse me. This is not used. Everything else on here is, so we have our ground connected to another ground, power obviously connected to another power. A lot of this was actually, for my application, was straight just connect it. So here we have blue and white connected to a light blue and white, orange and white connected to a solid orange. Then these are all of our speakers. They matched up perfectly. On these for connectors, I did use the ones that have like a heat shrink on the ends. So just to kind of seal this up nicely, get a good crimp, get a nice connection that's not going to come apart. And then we have a red that connected up. I spent a fair amount of time kind of navigating what needed connected and what didn't. That's our radio there, or antenna, excuse me. Which brings me around to this guy. There's a bunch of stuff connected to it. This is the iData link. This connects just to the back of the head unit that says the iData information on it. Everything else was actually color coded, and you couldn't really mess it up. There are some additional plugs that were not needed for my application. This setup allowed me to keep all of my factory controls. When I have this hooked up and Android Auto or Apple CarPlay on, the talk button on my steering wheel works perfectly with this. So just wanted to do kind of an overview, because this took me a while to figure out. Like some of the connections like speaker, power, ground, that was easy. But what I needed as far as some of the other hookups wasn't as easy to understand. I had two different sets of... The Maestro kit comes with a really nice detail for you, but I used two different ones to figure everything actually out. I've never used this OBD2 thing. Actually connects and looks at a lot of your vehicle information. I haven't used it yet. I'll probably give that a shot this time. I plan to put my Edge CTS in the 6-liter, so might as well give it a shot. But it connects, like this is the connection you need for a lot of other things as well. So there is some cool stuff to be had with that setup. So here is everything on here. Now there is, my GPS is not hooked up on this. That goes on the back here. GPS right there. Here's an HDMI hookup. There's a couple different things on this that we can get into feature set later, but this is how I have this all wired up. You need this kit to do it. Really cool kit, does a lot of different stuff, and there's a second one of these that lets you do even more. Basically, you can have auxiliary switches on your head unit that you can mess with, which I think is pretty cool. I plan to be setting up the Ford auxiliary switches, but in the future, I might consider making that switch just because I do really like it. This does need programmed. We can show that in the future if somebody wants it. But that was actually a really easy walkthrough. You can set your different buttons for stuff. So I forget which plug it is. Oh, here's the plug. To hook up to your computer, you have to go to the website. It's a process, but it is really cool. It was pretty easy to walk through it all once you did and got the product registered. I did forget to tell you that the kit does need programmed. You have to hook it up to a computer with internet to program it. Pretty easy thing to walk through. Go on their website, and it's step-by-step instructions. It's nothing hard to do. Works really nicely, but you do need to do that step. I forgot to show that. We have our GPS antenna right there. I ran the wire down here, under here through the dash, and I was able to relatively easy bring it out, go through this, and come out here so we can have our GPS up. I had it behind the dash, and I did have some issues with it, so we're just going to try this and see how that works. If it's better, then great. If not, I will continue to work on that Apple CarPlay, I believe, uses the phone GPS. Android Auto uses this external one you have to put in. So this will also give me a nice place to tuck some wires away down here without cluttering up too much over there. So basically we're gonna run this up. We're gonna run this wire up one to connect right here, and we'll neatly tie the slack up and leave it back here. Maybe tie it up. There's a cross member up there, tie it onto. So that'll take care of the GPS, making that look nice and clean. Now for the factory satellite, there's a cutout up here for it. I'm just gonna put it in. I don't have satellite radio. This radio will take it. I have no want for it. I use Spotify. But if you want it, there is an adapter you can get to connect, but I'm just gonna tuck it up out of the way. On these projects, the less stuff you have to wrestle with, the better, because it does kind of turn into a lot that you're kind of fighting with, especially when you're trying to keep things looking as clean as possible, which to a degree is hard with what we're doing right now. So again, these are the 3 absolute truck connectors. Like I said, mine doesn't. Sometimes they have a third. This wiring harness does take that, will take that, so there's no problem there. And then this is our microphone, so that'll have to get hooked back up. But for the most part, we can start getting ready to put this stuff back in. All right, so I zip tied stuff, and it's still just, it's a wreck, man. But it's a lot of wires. I miss the days when this is all you messed with, and even this was more, a lot of trucks just had a plug to deal with. But yeah, we have cooler stuff now than we used to. So anyway, I'm gonna start just feeding some of this stuff back in. Like the antenna wire, I like to kind of push the wires back in the direction that they kind of came from to begin with. I think it helps a little bit clean things up, but again, I don't go too crazy with it, otherwise it'll make it worse when you go to pull stuff out later. And yeah, we'll see how. That's one nice thing with the newer head units that are shallow like this, with all these wires we're trying to now fit in. It does help make it a lot easier than if you had a full length head unit to deal with. So there we go. Now this guy, I do want to run down and see if I can't run this over to the OBD2 connector, because I just want to see what the features are. You know, it sounds cool what they said. So yeah, so there's still some wire running to do exactly, and cleaning things up. Obviously we'll have this back out again in the near future, but all in all, I am happy. I do need to get these pieces behind here. Again, there's a lot of different head unit options you can do. What I like about this one is I can actually hook a total of 3 cameras up to it, which I do plan to do. We plan to get a front camera on here as well. I'm also going to be hooking up something to look at my hitch while I'm hitching up for my 5th wheel, which, because of my bed cover, I can't see at all. But all factory controls work, and on the factory one, like, there was an issue with the sync on this. I don't know what it was. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Very common issue. This bypasses that. I still have all my controls, so I can still go through songs, get my more than what any factory 6.7 came with in this year. I think 17's when they got Android Auto. But if you have an 11 through 15, or excuse me, 11 through 16, this is really the best way to go. I don't know why people would spend, like, I think it's $1,000 to put the Lariat head unit in, and it doesn't have near the functionality of this. Scrap that stuff. Don't go with it. Go with this option. It's much better, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next upload.